Good afternoon, everyone. It's once again a privilege to be assembled here. Just a few announcements before we continue. Firstly, the books. If anyone still needs advice, they're $20 a book, and you can put the amount, either give it to one of us or we're just going to put it in the donations box anyways. Secondly, if there are any more questions, you have until the end of the next break. So the end of the next break till 2:30, because at 2:45 then we're going to have a question and answer period. That should last for a little while. We'll see what kind of questions we get and how long that takes. Thirdly, the leftover food, the committee wanted to let you all know that we'll be donating it to the Cooperative Care Center and the Change Healthcare Brockville. Did I get that right? Yeah, so we're going to disperse that either today or tomorrow so that we can add to the care in our community. And then lastly, you've seen very fine ladies taking care of us for lunch and all the setup in our house and in our church. And I just would like to give them a little round of applause. And with that, we'll open with singing. It's In Christ Alone, is Trinity Psalter hymnal number 265.
when I was in Italy and I spoke like this, 3 different sessions. The third one I asked, aren't you tired of hearing me speak? Everybody said no, but I told them I was tired of hearing myself speak. Anyway, here I am again. So, well, first I wanted to mention, because I'm going to forget later, and I'm getting old, my mind forgets things easily. But these songs, all 3 of them were really so good. The first one, where it says, now I lost the, whatever befalls, be thou my vision, O ruler of all. And I remember singing that, because I was hearing it in my car once when my son was alive, and I remember singing that along, and whatever befalls, you know. And then this one again, you know, like from first cry till the grave, Jesus commands my destiny. So it's all in God's hands. And the second one was written by William Cooper, who was, he had a mental illness, so it was very moving too. But I'll mention some more about him later. Okay, so we're supposed to talk about how the church can help. So also, anything I say, it's basically from my experience and things that I learned from other people, and a lot about my pastor, like you heard me quoting my pastor a lot. But you don't, take everything with a grain of salt. It's like, because I was talking to somebody, and I don't want to give the impression that I neglect one thing because I emphasize another. It's what we were saying about the barrel, you hit both sides. So sometimes I may emphasize something, and that doesn't mean the other things are not important. So just to clarify that. Okay, so how can the church help? So I had some points here. The first one would be education, which is what we were saying before about being informed. That is important for everybody, just to try to be informed and to know what is mental illness, even if you don't know all the details of everything, but just basically in general, so that, if somebody in your church goes through the same thing, you are more prepared to help. And it's like there's a lot of professional information out there, and to take advantage of that, because sometimes some Christians don't want to pay attention to what psychiatrists or other professionals say, but it's like a little bit having humility and to know that just because we're Christian doesn't mean we know everything. And we can learn a lot from people who studied these things. So that would be one thing. Okay, one thing obvious is love. And there's a lot to say about that. But the thing is that many times people don't know how can I love a person who has a mental illness. And again, it's so difficult, because I can't tell you do this or that, because every case is different. So, there might be some people who don't want to talk to you, or you find different situations. So there's 2 different, sometimes I notice there's 2 different trends sometimes that come up. One, people want to help so badly that they start giving suggestions. But this is not just about mental health, about anything. You know, I'm sure you've all experienced that. People coming up to you with a ton of suggestions about everything, which is okay, you know, and sometimes we can also joke about it, but because people want to feel useful. But anything like mental illness that really, first of all, it's hard to know. It's like I was saying, there's a lot of mystery. And then each case is different, so you have to be very careful about giving advice to the person or even the family. Even the family, because I remember in the beginning I didn't know what to do. And when I heard so many different people giving me different advice, it was almost more confusing. So sometimes it's just better just to be there for the person. I'm not saying don't, again, I don't want to emphasize one thing and not the other, but I'm not saying don't give advice at all or don't help at all, but be sure that you know what you're saying, you know, like not just know about the illness, but also know about the person. Before you can give an advice, you need to know the situation very well. One thing I learned, not just in my own experience, but I also saw it happen with a friend of mine, to be able to help a person that has a mental illness, but I think it's anybody to be able to help anybody, but especially in that case, you have to win their trust. There has to be a bond of trust. Especially with things like schizophrenia, because there's a book is called I Am Not Sick, I Don't Need Help. And in that book, it kind of helps you to, if you want to, you can buy it because it's very useful actually. But it helps you to relate to somebody, and especially to a person who does not want to admit that there's a problem, which is very, very common. Partially, I think it's in everybody's nature. We don't always want to admit that we have a problem ever. But even more so in that case, because then, you know, many times you suggest seeing a therapist, seeing a psychiatrist or something, and those things, they create stigma, and also sometimes there's a natural condition, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it because I should have written it down, but anyway, there's a natural condition that some people with mental illness experience that they become convinced that they really don't have a problem. And it's really difficult to break that. But it's kind of understandable because, like, if you're convinced you don't have an illness, a physical illness, right? And somebody says you need to take these pills, no, you don't want to take those pills. So to just try to give and I'm giving the examples of medication, but it could be anything. You try to give advice to a person that doesn't think there's a problem, it's not going to work. So I've seen it where you just kind of go back a little, step back a little, and just become a friend, you know, just develop a friendship, and then maybe there will be this trust between you. I think, like, if there's a person in your congregation and you know they have mental illness, the goal in your mind should not be, I need to make sure this person is healed. You know, of course, maybe you're hoping that, but as a congregant, not as a pastor, but just like a regular person in the church, you don't want to see that person as a patient, basically. You want to see that person as a person. And a person who's going through something, so you befriend them. and you try to do anything like you would do with any person in this church, and talk to them, and if they're receptive, maybe they don't want to talk, but sit next to them, until they feel comfortable. And then if they become comfortable with you, invite them out for a coffee. And I've seen this at work. I've seen it with my son. So initially, with my son, when he had, after he was diagnosed, I realized there was either a temptation to give too much advice, and then he confused me completely, or the opposite, which is avoidance, and you don't want to talk because you don't know what to say. And I remember I kept hoping that somebody would be his friend at that time, and most people were even his age, or kids his age, were avoiding. And I know it was for that reason. And I felt like, the mother that goes, do you want to be my son's friend? I actually went to ask a few young people, go talk to my son. But that felt really funny for me to do that. But, mothers do that. They don't care what people think. But then finally there was a young man that I didn't even have to ask him, and he just started to invite my son out, and they just talked about anything. They just went out to do the normal things that young people do. And then once in a while, something would come up, because after my son died, I talked a lot to this young man, and he said that sometimes my son would bring up things to him and talk about things that were going on in his life. And it just because he felt at ease with this person. So that's the goal. The goal is not, this person has schizophrenia or bipolar or whatever, and we need to help him to get better, or I don't know. But the goal is just to become a friend and just to be there for them. So one thing that I think, I've seen different churches, and I can understand how a lot of people don't know how to relate or don't know how to talk, but I think the church has a lot of potential for helping people in many, many ways, not just this. And we're not tackling it into our potential as much as we should, because we are a community of love and a community of faith and a community of hope, and we have so much to offer, and we just don't always use all our potential. And I think we have a place in society that other people don't have. No one has this place, and we can offer so much more. So I think it's very important to just help people to feel at ease, to feel comfortable. And so I have an example in all my going around to different churches. I visited one church where this was actually put into practice more than any other place I've been. And in every church I've been, I see people very, very open and very willing to try anything, and this is so encouraging for me. But in this church, it was amazing, because I saw they had more people with mental illness in the church than I'd ever seen before. And I said, what are you doing? Are you like advertising? But no, it was like more like maybe word of mouth, and I'm not really sure. They didn't even know themselves why. There's so many people with mental illness. But the thing is, it was very open, and I had, people, I spoke a little like here, and then people came up to me, and one lady came up and said, hi, my name is so-and-so, I have schizophrenia. It's like, okay. It's like, You know, like you would say, I'm an artist or whatever. And that's the way it should be. It should not be, okay, she said that I have schizophrenia because I was talking about it, but there was no shame, there was no, you know, oh, I have schizophrenia, or no, it was just normal. And I saw the community was like that. There was one other girl that had OCD, but just really serious. And she was actually going to go to a camp. I'm not really sure what it was, but a place where they had an intensive program for a while. And everybody went up to her because they knew that she was going, and they gave her gifts. And I saw how everybody treated her, and just like anybody else in the church, there was so much love. And I remember after I went up to the elders and I said, what are you doing? What are you doing to have this? And they didn't know. They said, I don't know, but they said, maybe it's because we know we're all sinners. And I thought, that could be, you know, just to know that we're all broken in some ways, you know. Maybe some people may have their minds that may not be functioning the way that we are hoping or they are hoping, but so many parts of us are not functioning the way we want, you know, like, you know, our sins keep coming back, and we fight them, but they come back. And the more we remember that, and the more, you know, it's a broken world. We are all in it, and some people have one challenge and some people have another. I used to tell my son I admired him so much because I used to think, I'm fighting my sins, I'm fighting temptations, I'm fighting a lot of stuff in my life, and it's nothing compared to what he was dealing with, you know. So I kept telling him I admired him a lot. So anyway, the main thing I want to say is just be a friend. Yeah, and then don't forget the family, because families are going through a lot. So try to do something for them. In my book, I told about a friend that came to my house, and she helped me clean the house. But it's like, if she had said, can I come and help you clean or something, I would have said no. But she just came and she just started to do the dishes or whatever. Okay, I'm not gonna say no. But you know, just being there for the family, being there for the people. I guess we should all be there for each other. And I'm saying this, it's not like I am a shining example, but it's something that I have to keep reminding myself. And my other pastor, I quoted my pastor a lot, my present pastor, people came up to say, who is this pastor? My present pastor is Bill Godfrey. You may know Bob Godfrey, that's the famous one. So he's his son. But my previous pastor, that was Mike Brown, I learned a lot from him too. And he used to say that you have to not go out of your way. He had another, almost like, I forgot the exact words, but almost like feel, you have to get out of your comfort zone. But he had another word, I can't remember. But, you know, not always, because we have our comfortable lives and things that, you know, we like to do certain things. And he said you have to get out of that for others when others need you. And I thought that was very useful to me, because I used to well, I still do. I can't say I overcame that. But put myself and my comfort first, you know, and then if I had time, care for others or reach out to others. But it should be the other way around, you know. First see what other people need, and then you think about yourself. And again, balance, the barrel, because you don't want to run yourself down that you can't do any good to anybody. But I'm just saying, there is a temptation to go in one direction, so I'm just trying to push the barrel on the other side. Other things that you can do for the family, like calling people or texting them, but even to the person itself, like you can say, oh, can I have your phone number, and you want to go out sometimes. My previous pastor, Mike Brown, something that was really good, that really amazed me, is he used to come at least once a week. Our church is not far from our house, so he would go home. He had a motorcycle at that time, and he would go home with his motorcycle, and he would stop at our house and play chess with my son. And that impressed me so much. They didn't do anything, just play chess. And then, sometimes the conversation would start, but he wouldn't push it, just playing chess and how's it going? And that was so natural. It's not like I'm your pastor, I come to visit you and I want to know how you're doing. It could be a little intimidating, but just playing chess. It wasn't. And my son looked forward. He had all his chess pieces ready and waiting for him. So little things like that. I'm just giving you some examples, but there's so much more you can do. What else? Martin Luther, he talked about, in those days they called depression, they called melancholy. But he gave an advice not to leave people alone. And he was talking even about himself. That he said whenever he felt depressed or discouraged, he would go out and talk to somebody. And he would say that sometimes even the washerwoman would preach the gospel to him. So just to go out, and that is so difficult. I'm saying it, but I know there are times that a person who's depressed does not want to go out, that they want to be alone, they want to be in their bed and just stay within their depression. So you can't push them, but the ideal is to try to provide ways to get them out. And that's the other thing about that the church can, being part of the church, they know that they are part of a family and a community. I have a funny story about Martin Luther, though. It's just too funny not to mention it. Because Luther, he was great, but he was not always the best example of tact and sensitivity. So once when Melanchthon was in bed for weeks with depression, Luther ordered them to get up. And he said, if you don't get up, I'll excommunicate you. So don't do that. This is an example of what not to do. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because Melanchthon got up. And I think it's because they were good friends. So there is a point that when you have a friendship and a trust, a bond of trust, you can almost do anything. Like I saw with my sons, whenever I was able to get to that point of trust, then I made a lot of mistakes. But if I made a mistake, it was not a big thing. Before, when there were times when we did not have this bond of trust, and I would make a mistake, he would immediately interpret it as something much, much worse. And I had to say, no, I didn't mean that. But once that bond was established, he knew I was well-meaning. So that's so important if you can manage to do that. And the book, as I said, kind of gives you some tips on how to do that. Yeah. It's just basically a matter of being there and being honest. And, always apologize. I always told them I was sorry whenever. And, they get to the point when they really can believe that you are truthful, that you don't have because like when you have paranoia, which is very often connected, and they already suspect anybody. So if you can communicate that you're really sincere, that you're not lying, that's very important. But it takes time. It's not something you do automatically. Now, if maybe you already have a really good relationship with a person, that's all the better. But there was another example, a friend that I had in my church. She had a friend, and this friend started to have delusions, and she thought that her husband, I forgot the whole thing, something that her husband was trying to kill her, or something terrible. I don't remember all the details. But what I remember is that the friend understood that this person was having delusions, and because they were such good friends, she was able to advise her. But the relationship had already been established. So my friend said to her, do you trust me? And this person said yes. And so she said, I think you need to see somebody, basically. But she led him first to a pastor that was had dealt with a lot of problems like this, and then they went to him, and he was able to direct her to some other form of help. But the first step, she was able to get this person to take the first step because they had this relationship. And she said, do you trust me? And the person said yes. So just to point out how important that is. And then in my book, I talk about a young man who was a close friend of somebody with schizophrenia. And as I told you, I interviewed so many people. And I asked this person, what did he do during the times they were together? And I'm just going to quote what he said. He said, I think what drew him to trust me was that I often did not try to prove that he was wrong in his suspicions. Because that's another thing. They're going to tell you stuff, and then you can say, no, it's not true. But don't go there right away, because they're not going to believe you. And if they say, I don't know, there's the mafia's outside with their guns ready to attack the church, most probably not. But if you just say, no, it's not true, it's the end. So he says, empathizing with him, trying to re-narrate the events he told me usually went a long way over time. When I could bear with him, his anxiety usually dropped, and he would forget about the object of his fear. I think he was even, and I didn't write it here, but I think he also said something like, like when he talks about re-narrate, okay, so there's mafia outside, have you seen them, and where are they, or something like that, a little bit more, but without saying, no, I don't believe it. And then bearing with him often meant listening to him talk for a long time, and instead of responding directly, just asking if he wanted ice cream. So I thought that was really good. And again, do not take this as this is what you do when somebody has delusions. Obviously not. There are times when you don't want to ask if they want ice cream. So there are times when they really need help immediately, and you know, it's again a matter of wisdom and judging each situation and everything. But I'm just, because we are so prone to go in one direction, so I'm trying to present the other side and show that sometimes it's just good to be friends without, you know, trying to have a big intervention suddenly. Okay. Yeah, for caretakers, when you want to help caretakers, you can also ask, depending on the situation, but you could see if there's a way that you can give them some respite, you know, like go to their house and do something, or take the person out, or, you know, but something, because you have to remember that people who live with someone who has a mental illness, it depends on the situation, but if it's a serious situation and they're under constant one crisis after the other, they need a break sometimes. So just trying to help them to get that break. Okay, and then many people told me when my son was with me when he was ill, they used to say, give him the gospel. A lot of people said, give me the gospel. And that was like the first time that really I had to think about that. It's like, what does it mean, give him the gospel? And I think it's just the way that really worked for me was like emphasizing God's love to him, rather than, because there, at least my son was already under a lot of guilt, feeling guilty about a lot of things. And like I said, there's a shame that comes with it, there's guilt, and there's a lot going on. So the last thing they need is just to hear a lot of law and rebukes and everything. So I try to always encourage him to know that God really loved them. So bringing them to church would be the best, right? But at the same time, they don't always want to come. It depends. My son pretty much came all the time. I think I said that also. I had to deal with something similar with somebody else, and this person did not want to go to church for a strange reason that I never understood. Like, something happened in the church, and he was convinced that some people had something against him. And so anyway, it's all this to say, it's not always easy. There might be something that might stop them from coming to church. And since we were talking about William Cooper, we sang a song. So John Newton had a similar problem with William Cooper. So John Newton and William Cooper were really close friends. And for some time they lived nearby, but then Cooper had a major crisis where we don't know exactly what happened, but there was a mention of blood, so I don't know if he tried to kill himself, or we just know there was a really major crisis, and John Newton went there, and then he took Cooper into his house. And William Cooper lived with John Newton for a while in the same house, which is amazing, because they already had so much going on in that house. They had already adopted two kids from some relatives that had died, but they opened up their door, and it's not an easy thing. In my book, I have a whole chapter about what to do, whether to keep people home or not when it's your own son, and let alone bringing somebody in. And again, it's all a matter of wisdom, you know. And in this case, he thought that that was the thing to do. But, and if you read the book, I quote Newton a lot. And he had some fantastic quotes. But Cooper didn't want to go to church for a while after some time. And he was definitely a believer. He wrote some of the most amazing hymns and everything. But something happened with him too, and he just didn't want to go anymore. And Newton just accepted it, you know. He didn't push him. I'm sure that he asked him many times to go, but you know, just didn't push him. And yeah, I just recognized it was a side effect of this illness. So I talked also to a pastor near my church who has a lot more experience. More people in his church had the same situation with different types of mental illness. And he said part of this individual's anxiety stems from being around other people. So we should find ways to help them to attend worship, but we also need to be long-suffering. So you try to get them in, but you don't push it, and you know, try gently. So there's different things. I think I talked to somebody here, there's actually in this room, when I wrote the book, and she said that some churches have a separate room where people can listen to the sermon without being surrounded by others. Or sometimes there might be a section in the back next to the exit where a person can feel free to leave. So it's just a matter of being sensitive that sometimes not everybody can just be together with the others. Yeah, and just, I think also, yeah, also it's a matter of not expecting everybody to be the same. And I think that has a lot to do with it, because I think all of us, we like, you know, we gravitate, I guess, toward people who are like us, I guess. And it's not the best thing for a church to be that way. You know, I don't think a church should be where everybody is exactly the same, looking the same, and acting the same. Our church is not, because we're in San Diego, it's a very mixed community, but not just different ethnicities, but we have different personalities, different people, and people come to church dressed in all kinds of different ways. I think it's healthy for a church just to be able to accept each other, and it depends, you know, maybe you live in a community where there's, people are all the same and they dress the same and act the same, but it's good, because then if you have somebody with mental illness that is quite different and acts differently and behaves differently, it's good to be able to accept it and not expect everybody to look the same way. And I'm talking about looking, but also behaving. The reason I'm bringing this up is because I have the wonderful quote again from John Newton, and he said, basically he said we can't expect everybody to grow at the same speed and in the same way. So he said, we say such a building is a house, not only when it's tiled, painted, and furnished, but while the walls are yet unfinished, while it's been encumbered with rubbish and surrounded with scaffolds, which, though not a part of the edifice, but are designed in time to be removed, are helpful in carrying it on. So you still call it a house, but it's not finished. we speak of a field of wheat not only in harvest but in spring, and say, it is day when the light is gradually increasing, though the sun be not risen. So, and then he concludes and says that it is true, there are unsound convictions and impressions which are not abiding, but the Lord's laborers should weed with a gentle and cautious hand, lest in their attempt to pull up the tares, they should pluck up the wheat also. And then it gets a bit stronger. It would be well if both preachers and people would keep more closely to what the scripture teaches of the nature, marks, and growth of the work of grace, instead of following each other in a track like sheep, confining the Holy Spirit to a system, imposing at first the experience and sentiments of others as a rule to themselves, and afterward dogmatically laying down the path in which they themselves have been led as absolutely necessary to be trodden by others. I think that's really amazing. It's something to read slowly, because I think we all tend to do that, you know, like, that's the way I've done it, so that's the way you should do it. There's a tendency. But yeah, we need to recognize, and one thing it's always impressed me about the gospel, but especially in the Gospel of John, where you see how Jesus interacted with people so differently. Then in the other Gospels, you see how he called his disciples, but in the Gospel of John, you see, you know, how he approached Nathaniel, and then the two disciples of John the Baptist, Andrew and, forgot the other one. But anyway, when he called them, you know, they said, Master, where do you stay? And he said, come and see. But then with Nathaniel, he had a completely different approach. He just said, he told him, you know, when you were sitting under the tree, I already knew you. So, I mean, just different ways that he approached people, and some ways, when you approach certain people, you're kind of taken back, right? Like the Syrophoenician woman, when he said, you know, the bread is for the children, not for the dogs. Oh, wow, that's Jesus? Okay, he knew what he was doing, you know, obviously. It's not something that we need to copy, but it's something that he knows how to speak to each of us, and he spoke to her perfectly. She gave the perfect answer, and he knew she was going to do that. So, you know, I'm not saying do that, because it was Jesus, and he had all that foresight. But I'm saying it's amazing to me how he dealt differently with people, and we don't need to deal with everybody exactly the same way. It's just something I had to learn. I learned so much with my son going through this, and then, like I said, I had a similar experience later, and I'm still growing, still learning, but there's so much to learn. And I think also it's something that the church can appreciate, is that things that we don't understand sometimes are an opportunity to grow. I realize that, because if everything is easy in life, yeah, we grow, I'm sure. I mean, God is not, you know, still helps us to grow. But when we have challenges, you know, we grow a lot more. And especially when things are mysteries and are puzzling, it forces us to ask questions and to look for Christ in ways that we have not looked before. And so I think the church should appreciate that. If there's somebody with a mental illness in your congregation, besides remembering to see this person as an image bearer, made in the image of God as much as anybody else, but also to see that as an opportunity to grow as a church. We have this person that can help us to see things differently, to see something new. And I've learned so much from my son and other people that that crossed my path and or that I worked with that had mental illness. I learned so much from them. They have, most of them, what I noticed, they have some gifts that at least I don't have. First of all, they're more patience. Life slows down when you have schizophrenia, I noticed, because you have so many things to deal with that most people don't. And you learn to deal with those things. And so other things are not important anymore, They don't have this rush, oh, it's time to do this, it's time to do that. We do that, they don't. They have, each person has different things to offer. And one thing I saw with both of my sons, and I don't have to I don't want to get into too many details or anything, but I've seen, and maybe it's not for others, but I've seen that both of them had so much capacity of forgiveness and even sensitivity toward others. Almost like because they had to slow down in other ways, they don't have to deal with so many of our day-to-day things. They have to deal with other stuff. Because they have to slow down, I noticed that they can notice things that I didn't notice. And I'm talking about other people too that I know that have schizophrenia, that I've been talking to. They're more careful and more, careful about what they say sometimes. And it could be because they have so much going on in their mind, but I'm just saying this because there are gifts ways that they can contribute to our lives. And we need to see that too, not just see them as patients, They are in our church for a reason, and they have a lot to offer to us, ways for us to grow. And they can teach us patience, because patience, I think, is very, very underrated today. And I've been thinking recently also how the church, I think we are going back to the first 3 centuries in church history, because they were around pagans and we're getting back there. I have so many, I teach Italian, so I deal with so many people. They know nothing about the Bible, young people, their parents never taught them, and they grow up not thinking that it's important. They don't know absolutely anything about the Bible. And so we're going back there, basically. And I've been kind of reading about the early church. I write a lot of stuff about church history. It's fascinating to me. But their emphasis was on loving, growing their communities, and they were talking a lot about love and forgiveness, because they had to deal with people persecuting them, and patience. They wrote so many things, and there's Tertullian, Augustine, and there's another one, I forgot, Cyprian, I think. All 3 of them wrote treatises about patience. So that means it was a big thing, just to learn to have patience. And I think the church, we are getting back there. So those are good things to learn today, just to have patience. And they didn't see fruit growing, every day. It was more like later on that the churches were crowded with people, but initially, no, but they just kept going. And I just think it applies to this too, just to have patience with people and wherever they're in their lives, to accept it and be there for them and help them grow, and they will help you grow, and it's an exchange. So I think that's basically what I was going to say. I don't know if I forgot anything. I think that's basically it, yeah. Yeah, and then that's the same pastor that I mentioned, the one that is in a church with a lot of people with mental illness. He said, in order to work alongside a person with mental illness, you have to be very patient, which I just said. Most of these ailments cannot be cured in weeks or months. They're often unpredictable and feel like a roller coaster. So I think anybody who has lived with mental illness can relate to that, and you just have to have patience and just trust God and work as a community, and the pastor can be helping. And the thing is, pastors are pastors, they're not psychiatrists or psychologists, and psychologists are not pastors. And I think it's very good to keep that separate. And that doesn't mean you don't give any advice, but you don't try to take the place of a psychologist, and vice versa. So these are just a lot of things I learned, and the book is long. When my husband first saw it, he says, it's very thick. So there's like many pages, but I don't think it's too difficult to read, so hopefully it will be helpful. Okay, we're gonna have questions, or, yeah?
Yeah, I've got a little bit of a 15-minute break.
Okay.
And then we'll look at the questions in the box and move on from there.
Okay. One time I took this to the bathroom with me in another church.